Hey everyone, my name's Jessica. Welcome to this very stormy, gloomy kind of day. I decided to film outside because it's not too hot right now in the city, and I'm just taking in some fresh air before the storm probably will hit later today. But for now, I think we're good. So thanks for joining me on this video. It's going to be about how to make friends as an adult, especially if you're in a new city, and then also a bit on how to be a good friend, be a good listener, and how to get to know a person. I think today I'm going to keep it pretty short. I think it's a very important topic that I think could be taken in a lot of different directions. So I hope to expand on today's talk a bit more in the future, but I think for now we'll just keep it kind of at the basics, and I think it'll be a good starting point. I hope you'll find some of the tips and just like general advice and like storytelling useful. Just for a bit of context on me, I moved to New York after I finished undergrad and have in the last couple of years become really interested in fostering deep relationships with people, meeting new friends, and just kind of learning about myself through others. And I think it's been a really important, and it probably is like a lifelong journey that I'm on, but I wanted to just share on this topic because I think I've found, as I've spoken with different friends, that making friends as an adult is actually quite a tough thing, and there's not really a guidebook on how to do it necessarily. I think when you're in college, when you're in school, it's easier because you just have access to like such a wide range of people that are right there on your campus and who are obviously the same age as you or about the same age, and you just have shared interests, and like geographically you're in the same place, so like naturally you have something in common already, and so it's much easier to strike up a conversation that way. But I think when you graduate and you enter the workforce, maybe you've moved to a new city, or you've moved away for the first time from your hometown, it can be harder to meet new people because then you're kind of just like, well, what do I have to say to like a random stranger, right? Like we didn't go to the same school necessarily, we don't share the same hobbies. What should I do? So I just have like my notebook here that I kept some notes in, and also like one of the books that I've been reading recently, which is How to Know a Person by David Brooks. I feel like I just have it here for moral support almost. I may or may not like take a look at any of the quotes inside, but it kind of touches on this topic. The subtitle is The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. So again, I think like this idea of like how to make friends, how to keep friends, how to be a good friend is very, you can go in a lot of directions, as I mentioned. So for the purposes of today's talk, I might not delve so deep into like the things that he talks about, but we'll see if I can get there. So the first thing that I wrote about was mindset. And I think it's an important place to start because your mindset is kind of how you approach the situations that you're in, right? So what I mean by that is in the context of making new friends, I think grew up not very introverted as a kid. I really liked singing and dancing and just, you know, talking to people. And then I think as I grew older, I became more reserved, more quiet, more reticent. And one piece of feedback that I got pretty consistently throughout college and probably even high school was just like, you know, great ideas, but, you know, we don't hear from you that much, or like, you know, you should talk more, things like that. And I think there's definitely truth to that, because it's not that sometimes I didn't want to say anything. Sometimes that was the case. I didn't really have anything to add, but often it was the case that I wanted to say something, but I felt like it wasn't the right moment or didn't know how exactly to phrase it. And so I think I kind of just put myself in this place where then, you know, after many times of like not saying anything, I would just end up being quite reserved all the time. And so I developed this self-image of I'm not someone who can just like strike up a conversation easily with someone I don't know. I'm not the type of person who talks a lot. I'm not the type of person who can just like go out, not know anyone at a party or an event and like, talk to people in that way. And I think it actually makes it very difficult to make new friends if you go in with that type of mindset and self-image, because it's counterproductive to what you're trying to do, right? And again, I think it's important to start with the mindset thing, because I don't think I'm alone when I say that, probably especially after COVID, all of us, whether or not you're introverted, extroverted, somewhere in between, have struggled with making human connections again, and have struggled with striking up a conversation, or if someone talks to us first, responding in a way that feels natural. And so I think that we can all probably relate to the idea of just like feeling a bit awkward, feeling a bit out of place when you are talking with someone new. And so what I realized though is that the idea that I was not someone who could just strike up a conversation with someone, or like, meet someone new, meet new friends in a new environment, was simply just a story I was telling myself. It was just like a mindset, a idea that I had about myself. And I think that when I started to go to different events, which I'll get into on the section of like how to actually make new friends. When I started to go to new events, or just like meet up with people one-on-one even that I didn't know before, I realized that communicating and having a great conversation with someone is not unlike anything else, where you just really need to practice. And it's not something that is only accessible to the extroverts of the population, or the people that have something like really interesting to say all the time, or anything like that. It's really something that the more you practice it, the more comfortable you become in those situations, and the more that you're able to really like bring out your personality, even if you're just talking to someone for the first time, which I think is like what we all want to do, right? Is like we all want to be seen, as David Brooks writes about. And so I think that through practicing, I was able to prove to myself that this mental model that I had about myself, that I wasn't like very able to talk to people off the bat, was just not right. And actually, the more that I leaned into that message of like, I'm not that type of person who does that, the more it's holding me back from being able to meet people and connect. So I start with the mindset piece, because I think that it is something that we don't maybe think about too much, of like how we see ourselves, but it does affect how we present ourselves when we're in different situations. So, I mean, you could apply this to not only the idea of like making new friends, but just in general. But in this case, I think that showing myself through repetition that I was able to, and still am able to, meet new people and like strike up a great conversation, just showed that the idea that I had about myself wasn't right. So you could think of this as like going to the gym. Like on the first day that you start lifting, you probably aren't going to be able to curl like 50 pounds, right? I mean, I still can't right now, but like the idea is that you will need to work your way up there. And communication and having conversation with strangers is not unlike anything else that you want to do. It just takes practice. And obviously some people will be more naturally inclined to have that ability to strike up a conversation and have it feel natural than others are, but it doesn't mean that it's not accessible. It just takes practice. So that's the first thing that I want to start out with, which is the mindset, because I do think that it kind of sets the stage for the rest of what I'm going to be talking about. So the next piece is how to actually make friends. So let's say you want to put in your reps, you want to get that practice in with talking to new people and being social. And how do you actually do that? So as I mentioned, I moved to New York when I graduated college, and I had also gone to college outside of my hometown. So I guess I had two opportunities to explore like being in a different environment. But I really think a lot of the growth that I've seen in my social interactions has come in the last 2 years, I would say, most prominently. It's because I've made more of an effort to be social in the last couple of years. So what I will say is like, if this is for people that live in a big city, but I also think that you can like learn from it if you're not. And I will also have like a couple tips for people that don't live in a large city, but I think you can apply these ideas regardless of where you live. But that would be to start putting your email into all of the different random events that you see. So what I mean is, like, if you're in New York or like SF or LA, for example, there's a site called Luma, which it's kind of like a new Eventbrite type of site where you're able to, post your own event if you want to, and or they usually feature weekly roundups of events in those cities that I mentioned and more. And it's a good way to just see what's going on in your city. Even if you're not able to attend an event, let's say for some reason, but you're interested in that organizer, you could just put in your email so that next time when they have another event, you will get an email for it. And that way, you're just going to get more and more events showing up in your inbox that will eventually be of interest to you and probably align with your schedule. So I just started putting in my email to a lot of different newsletters that had events, the Luma site that I mentioned, and that I think helped kind of snowball, and like all of that added up to where eventually I was just like going to events every week, or just then you like meet people at those events and then they might introduce you to like a different event, etc. It just kind of all adds up together. So I will say, like, adding your email into different newsletters and or events, and like following organizers that you like, will be really helpful for you finding events that you like to attend, and then can therefore like meet people at who share similar interests as you. The other thing I will say is that you can utilize social media to your advantage. So I obviously am like trying to be mindful of my daily screen time, especially the time I spend on social media. But if there's one thing that it's, I think, good for, is introing you to different people and events that are going on in your city, that you might not otherwise be aware of. So I find that once you start engaging just by like clicking on the link of certain events, you'll probably get more and more on your feed. So again, it kind of, you're feeding the algorithm what you want to see more of. And I think that that's another good way to find different events that are in your city. So you'll notice like a lot of what I'm suggesting is very like event based. So I really do think that you can definitely meet people through, for example, I think I have friends that have tried like Bumble BFF before, which I think they've like found success in. I haven't tried it, but I will say that I do think it takes eventually like meeting up in person to really like solidify a friendship. If you're trying to make a real friend, you probably will have to like meet up in person at some point and see if like the connection is there. Because I think that in real life, connections are just so different than, chatting with someone online. But I think like if you don't live in a large city, maybe there's not as many events going on as like New York or LA, for example. I still think that there's ways where you can kind of scope out events. Like when I'm at home, like visiting my hometown, for example, I'll just like go to a restaurant, right? And I'll see like a lot of restaurants now have advertised like, okay, on Thursdays we do like bingo night, or like on Wednesday we have like live music every week. Especially I think in the summer it's a lot more events going on. And I think through that you don't have to like be in love. Let's say you're not like huge on bingo, for example, but like even just showing up, seeing new people, maybe just like chatting with a few while you're there, or just like the table next to you as you're playing, can really, again, like help you practice being more social and like talking to new people. And I think that the more that you kind of put yourself in that new environment where maybe you don't know anyone, the more that it's going to feel more familiar and just like less weird to you to like not know anyone, show up at this place and just like strike up a conversation, right? Because I think it's one thing to, have all of these ideas in your mind, but then it's another to really be out in the world and like putting it into play, all of the things that you've learned and want to try out, and just like it's not like each time you will necessarily like meet your best friend at these events, but I do think that it's all like kind of snowballing. It's like the more you show up here and then you hear about this other thing and then you go to that other thing and then you meet this person that interests you to this other thing, and it's just all very like additive in that way. But you'll never have that if you don't take that first step of just showing up, right? And so I think that the way that I've been able to make friends is really showing up to different things, whether it's a coffee chat or an event. I think that there's a lot of different opportunities that you have to like meet new people and practice. And like, I think the more you practice, the more like when you actually meet someone that you click with, you'll be able to strike up a great conversation with them. And then maybe you guys would like hang out after the event or at another time or something like that. Okay, so I think a lot of the focus I've had really is on events in your city. And I think that it's just like how I think I've found the most success, honestly, with meeting new people and just like having an environment in which I can just talk to people that I've never met before. I do think that it's definitely not the only way. You never really know where a connection will come from. A lot of people end up becoming friends with like their coworkers, for example. But I will also say, like, even if you aren't friends with your immediate coworkers, it doesn't mean you couldn't meet someone through who's also in your organization, but maybe is not on your same team, who maybe is like in your same industry. It could be through like LinkedIn, for example, like people wanting to, people who are interested in your industry and or what you do, who maybe want to grab a coffee with you, or maybe there's someone who you like admire like their career trajectory, you would want to grab a coffee with them. I think like it doesn't hurt to do like a cold outreach, which I've done before, but primarily for like networking purposes, not necessarily for like meeting friends. But I think again, like you never really know from where like a friendship could sprout. And I think that even if it's not a friendship necessarily, it could be like a professional relationship that you learn from them in some way. And I think no matter what, you're getting the chance to practice like talking to someone that you don't know, which I think is very helpful as a whole for finding friends and just like becoming more social in that way. So yeah, you never know like where a coffee chat will lead, honestly. And I think that it's worth exploring if you feel like you're in that mindset of like being open to meeting new people. So I think I covered that very like briefly, but maybe I'll do like a more in-depth, look at how to make friends in a later video. But I kind of also wanted to touch on, as I mentioned in the beginning, like how to know a person and like how to like sustain friendships. I was listening to this one Simon Sinek interview, and he just talks about how nowadays there's not really a rule book or guidebook for like how to keep friends, how to be a good friend. There's so many guides on like how to lose weight or like how to eat healthy or how to work out, things like that. But there's no guide for how to be a good friend. And I think he makes a good point, because especially now with the loneliness epidemic only getting worse, I think it's important to talk more about how do we show support for those we care about and how do we foster new friendships, right? Because I think it's just like a plant. Like at first you really need to tend to it to make sure that it has the environment, a fertile environment, in order to grow. And then from there, maybe you're still tending to it, obviously, but you don't necessarily need to be like prodding it, and kind of like worrying about it, maybe as you would as much in an early friendship, because a lot of things don't really make it to that like growth stage of like a plant growing. They might just kind of die off at the early stages, which is also like a learning opportunity. Like I've had cases where I've met people for coffee maybe once, and it's like for one reason or another we just like don't become friends after that. But it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's more just for whatever reason, like our lives at that time did not have our paths converge. And I think no matter what, it's great to like have gone to an event or wherever you met this new person, and then even after that you exchange info and like are interested in like meeting up again. And I think that in and of itself is like such a critical moment and like a learning moment, right? So I think it's really important, I think, to like have to keep putting yourself in those situations, like even if you don't know like what the outcome will be. So but in terms of, I think, how to grow a friendship, so in David's book he mentioned how he has this term called the illuminary, I think, or illuminator. And it basically just is someone who really allows the other person to shine, in the sense that the illuminator allows the other person to feel really seen in their presence. So I think that this goes hand in hand with the idea of being a good friend, because I don't think a good friend is necessarily one who like gives the best advice, or is the smartest person ever, or just like always has like a great story to tell you, but rather it's someone who, when you are going through a tough time, is there for you and is there to sit in the hole with you, right? Because I think often when we're going through a tough time, it kind of feels like we're in this hole and like we're closed off from the world and we're just really going through it. And I think a really good friend is someone who's not trying to like necessarily like reach down and like pull you out of the hole necessarily, but for a period of time can come down into the hole and just like sit with you and make you feel like you're not alone in whatever you're going through, even though obviously you are the one who has to help yourself. But I do think that having a friend who's there to listen and who isn't there to judge you is the most illuminating thing that anyone can do, because it allows you to feel like, oh, this person is really seeing me and seeing what I'm going through, and I don't feel as alone in like the things that I'm going through. So I think that it's about allowing your friend to feel like, I might not exactly know everything, right? And I might not understand it 100%, but like, tell me like the stories of your childhood, or like tell me like what was a tough time that you went through when you were in elementary school or like high school, or like what do you think was like a defining moment in your life when it came to um, making a decision that you made that was so critical. And I think it's through having these deeper conversations with people that you develop a true deep friendship and how you get to know someone. Because I think the root of friendship is a knowing and a seeing of the other person that makes you just feel like, wow, like that person really knows me. They get me so well. And you feel relaxed in their presence, right? You don't feel like you need to like explain yourself too much, or that you need to overcompensate by demonstrating certain trait that people might think is amazing. Like David talks about how he calls himself a topper, which I think he means is like someone who shows off through like, you know, the funny stories that they tell. I mean, he's a writer, he's an op-ed writer, so he's saying how like it's in his nature to give his 2 cents on everything. And so he says he's still working on it. But I think it's commendable that like he would even, you know, put his own personal situation like in the book, because I think that it shows that even if we know something, it doesn't mean that it's always going to translate in our actions and like how we are as people. And I think one thing that he writes about that's really that resonated with me is that he will, in his mind, like never be the type of person who's like super warm and like super like just I guess as soon as you see them like the friendliest person ever, like he doesn't feel like he will be that. But he's in his own way, I think, moving towards trying to become more of that illuminator type of person. And I think that we can all probably relate to that idea of like we're somewhere on that spectrum of like wanting to, of just like learning about who we are, how we can make others feel more seen. And I think that this part of this podcast is like the more open-ended piece, right? Which is like, there's so many directions that this can go, is like, when you're in the moment, like, how are you talking to someone, right? And then let's say like you do meet a few times after the initial meeting, and then it's kind of like, where does the friendship go after that? And I think that at the end of the day, what matters, in my opinion and in my experience in developing a deep relationship and like true friendship with people, is just beyond like the shared hobbies and interests, is just this interest in the other person, and this feeling of like, I would like to get to know you as a person. Like, tell me the stories that shaped who you are today and how you became this version of yourself. And I think people who are doing that work, maybe on themselves too, have that capacity to then be curious about other people and have that space for friendship, where it's a very selfless act to ask others about them, and like take moments to really listen to what they're saying, and not be so quick to prepare like your response, but rather just listen. And as I mentioned, like when friends are going through a tough time, trying to sit in the hole with them and like help them hold the emotion together, as opposed to just by themselves. And I think that moments like that help people feel really seen. So I think that is really all that I have for today. Again, like I said, it's like such a nuanced topic that I probably want to like delve more in the future, because I think there's a lot to be learned from this area. And I think that I like David, and probably anyone else who's interested in like getting to know others and like understanding how to be an illuminator, more of an illuminator, can probably all relate to the fact that this is like a lifelong thing, and it's always like tweaking and like finding your version of it, right? Because I don't think there's one image of like what an illuminator looks like necessarily, but rather many shades of it. So I think I'll just leave you with I'll try to find like a quote that he has that I liked. So he quotes this one author whose name is Frederick Buechner. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he tells a bit of his story. But one quote that I will leave you all with is, "What we hunger for, perhaps more than anything else, is to be known in our full humanness. And yet that is often just what we also fear more than anything else." And that's what Buechner wrote in his book, Telling Secrets. It's it is important to tell, at least from time to time, the secret of who we truly and fully are, because otherwise we run the risk of losing track of who we truly and fully are, and little by little come to accept instead the highly edited version which we put forth in hope that the world will find it more acceptable than the real thing. It is important to tell our secrets too, because it makes it easier for other people to tell us a secret or two of their own. So I like that quote a lot, because again, it just gets to that idea that to be open to meeting new people and having conversations with strangers is very difficult, but it's what we hunger for more than anything else, is really to be known, right? And I think that developing friendships is a great way to be able to explore someone else's humanness and also your own. And I think that one other thing that I read and thought was useful, it was like, this is Brooks writing, "Psychologists recommend that you ask your friend to fill in the blanks to these two statements. In our family, the one thing you must never do is blank. And in our family, the one thing you must do above all else is blank." And this helps basically you understand like your friends' values and like what type of family situation that they grew up in. And so I think that it's, yeah, useful if you're trying to maybe do that with a friend that you've known for a bit, or a friend that you maybe feel like close, very close and connected with, that you want to like get to know more. So I hope that this video was useful in some way. Again, I hope to like expand on it more, but just know that every single time you speak with a stranger and interact with them, it's really just you putting in that practice of then becoming more of a type of person that can maybe just like strike up a conversation with anyone like very easily. And then I think you'll slowly come to find that it is really an amazing feeling like you've like connected with someone for however long of time your relationship is. Even if it's just that 5 seconds that you interacted, it's still like a human connection. And I think like in this world where a lot of us like work from home, a lot of us are glued to our phones all the time, it can be really nice to just have a human connection. So I think above all else, I've just learned that having the in-person connection is the most amazing thing. So thank you all so much for watching, if you watched till the end, and I hope to make more of these really soon. And let me know what you think, or if you have any other ideas that you want me to talk about, let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye.